So Quinn, this new symphony of yours, your fifth, Harmonia, you said that you've been thinking about it for a while. When did it come into your heads to write this, and what were the initial ideas? What was the first impetus for the piece?
Well, the first ever ideas were kind of conceived actually on the first plane ride to Seattle in February of 2020. I had my notebook with me, and I was kind of making ideas. And one of them I wrote as plain sketch in parentheses, symphony number 5 with a question mark at the end. And that actually made it into the piece, into the first movement. And then more of the ideas came during the pandemic when I had already talked about the piece with you.
I always think it's great to link a living composer with music that has been very influential or important to them. When we were designing this, when we were talking about the piece and designing the program, I asked you if you had any suggestions for music that you thought would complement it well. And you want to talk about what you told me?
Yeah, I remember mentioning how I was under the influence of the music of Sibelius at that time. I've been listening to the symphonies a lot, specifically like the sixth and the seventh symphonies. And I just thought his sound world was very fascinating and definitely wanted to experiment with that.
So, can you talk a little bit about how the Sibelius influence shows up in this piece?
Well, absolutely. Yeah, he had a very interesting way of using the orchestra. He used the orchestra a lot to where he focused on the sonorities of each instruments, and he also experimented a lot with different combinations of instruments. For example, sometimes the low oboes get a sole, whereas they're rarely featured in that register. And that does show up in my piece. It shows up in the first movement with the oboes kind of sing this mournful triplet tune. He also had this very he saved the big moments in pieces. Whenever he used the full orchestra, it was for a reason, and he often built up to it. And so I did that quite a lot. And so you may notice that my piece sounds a lot romantic. It does sound like it's from the romantic period, and a lot of very expressive themes that kind of weave their way throughout the orchestra. Even in the second movement, which is kind of a restrained scherzo, it's not extroverted. Let's just say it's more of an introverted scherzo.
Yeah, I mean, there's some really lush writing for the strings, all playing in unison, these big, gorgeous romantic tunes. It's so satisfying to listen to. It's really and to play and to conduct, of course, it's just fantastic. So beyond the influence of Sibelius, what else would you want us to take away from this piece? What were some of the other things that you were trying to communicate?
It's definitely one of my most personal pieces. It was a piece that I explained to you that I kind of needed to write, and it was a piece that took shape during the pandemic and while those things were still fresh in our minds. And in a way, I still sought to remember that time in which it was conceived. So the third movement is subtitled In Memoriam 2020. That movement's interesting because it starts with a duo between two instruments you wouldn't normally expect, the tam tam and the piccolo. Two very different instruments, but they have this very mournful funeral duet.
Yeah, that's definitely a surprising moment, and one of the very interesting solo moments that, you're very, generous with giving out some nice solo bits for the members of the orchestra. I mean, there's a really interesting duet between the violin concertmaster and the oboe. Clarinet gets a very nice couple solo moments in the piece, flute, and then this, surprising turn of phrase where everything stops and we just get to hear the piccolo accompanied by very delicate touches in a huge tam tam, a large gong. Very exciting thing to have this world premiere of your symphony, which we're also pairing with Sibelius's Third Symphony. And then we're going to pair it with two smaller works by William Grant Still, who I know is another composer who has had an effect on your own work. Can you talk a little bit about your relationship with the music of William Grant Still?
The first piece of his I heard was the Afro American Symphony, the first symphony, and he has this way of communicating this purely American soul through his music that's just kind of unparalleled. So it's very much personal music, and it's personal to me, but I hope it will be personal to you as well.
And you're going to be here to conduct one of those pieces, the poem for orchestra, a very different William Grant Still than we hear in, say, the Afro-American Symphony, wouldn't you say?
Definitely, yes. More experimental here, leaning towards the style that was popular at the time. It was written 1944. So, but very much still.
A hugely expressionist and expressive piece of music. He calls it poem for orchestra, and it really does have sort of that the shape of a tone poem rather than any of the old forms of classical music. I mean, it tells a story very clearly, and it's sort of in two big sections with like a very angsty opening and then beautiful, lush kind of Judy Garland strings at the end.
Yeah, yeah. MGM, that whole Warner Brothers, almost corn Goldian.
Yes.
I don't even know if that's a term, but that Hollywood string sound you got in the 40s is definitely in this piece.
Then to round out the program, I mean, those three pieces would have been enough: Still's poem, Your New Symphony, and the Sibelius Third. But when I found out that there was a piece by William Grant Still called Threnody in Memory of Jean Sibelius,
Mhm.
we could not put that on the program.
And didn't he meet Sibelius, I
Did
think?
he? I don't know. You tell me.
I think he did. I think
Huh.
he actually went to Finland and met Sibelius in the 50s.
Wow. Okay.
Either that or he corresponded with him, one of those 2.
Our season theme for Harmonia this year is dialogue. And so this is the kind of program that I love, a program that was built in dialogue. I mean, you wrote your symphony for our orchestra, which was the group with whom you made your orchestral conducting debut back in February of 2020. And now you get to come back and create this new piece that's been written for us in mind. And you're going to be conducting the orchestra again, and you helped design the whole program. So I think that this is really the kind of thing that I strive for in working with a guest artist, is a
Mhm.
holistic approach to putting together a program. So I'm just so thrilled and excited not only to premiere your piece, but to engage in the whole project with you. It's going to be great.
Yeah, that's the hope.
Well, anyway, thanks so much for taking time to join us from your home in Dallas, Quinn, and we can't wait to have you here next week.
I will see y'all soon.